Hello everybody, this is Mr. Cooper and I'm the Curriculum Leader for English here at Wootton Park School. In this short video, I'm just going to be talking through the A-level in Film Studies and hopefully encourage you to think about it as an option for September 2021. So in this video, we're going to start off by talking about why you may want to study film. We'll then look at what exactly you will study and the curriculum maps. We'll then have a look at how the subject is examined in terms of the balance between terminal examination as well as non-exam assessments. We'll also have a think about who may want to consider this subject and try to break down a few of the myths that surround film studies. And finally, we'll consider why Wootton Park should be the right sixth form for you. So first of all, the course aims. So we have decided that we are going to follow the WJEC EDUCAS A-Level in Film Studies. The reason for this is that we feel that it enables learners to demonstrate knowledge and understanding of a diverse range of different films. This includes documentaries, films from the silent era, experimental films, short films, British films, Hollywood films, and those films coming not only from the more obvious locations such as Hollywood or Britain, but also from European and wider global contexts. Now, every film that we study, we have to make sure that we place it into a particular context. So that might be a social context, a cultural, political, historical, or maybe even a technological context, particularly when we look at how film has changed as an aesthetic medium over the years. When we study films, we have to think about the language of cinema and how exactly directors and producers encode their films with particular messages through the mise-en-scène and the cinematography. Once we have understood these meanings and we have developed our responses, we then start to think about how different spectators may respond to those films and then consider how critical approaches might change our own interpretations. So it is very much an academic course and requires us to think about a film not only in isolation, but within the wider cultural social context. What's very nice about the EDUCAS course as well is that it gives us the opportunity to apply our knowledge to the filmmaking process. In component 3, learners do have the option of being able to produce their own short film, or alternatively being able to write their own screenplay and evaluate it. So what will you study? There are 3 components to film studies. The first component is called Varieties in Film and Filmmaking. In section A, our learners will compare 2 films, one from the classical Hollywood period dating from 1930 to 1960. So, for example, they might look at Vertigo by Alfred Hitchcock and think about how that is very much a product of the studio system. And then they will compare it to a film from the New Hollywood period, which dates 1961 through to 1990, and look at how different European and global influences have impacted upon American film. In section B, learners will have the opportunity to look at 2 other American films since 2005. So, for example, they may look at a mainstream film such as Inception by Christopher Nolan, which, although has a very, very independent aesthetic and narrative, actually is based within a wider, larger Hollywood studio system. And then we'll compare that to very much an independent film, such as Richard Linklater's Boyhood, which, produced on a very, very small budget, was filmed over the course of 12 years using the same actors to trace a young boy's journey from youth to adolescence. In section C, we get a chance to look at British films since 1995. So that may be looking at films such as Shallow Grave or Trainspotting, and thinking about how they were influenced by European art house cinema. In component 2, we start to explore global filmmaking perspectives. So in the first section, we look at 2 global films, one European and one produced outside of Europe, and think about how different countries, different cultures encode their films in different ways. For example, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, which is a fantastic French film, which was made a few years ago, which was all told from the point of view perspective of a man who was suffering from locked-in syndrome after suffering a stroke. In section B, we look at documentary film. And within the documentary film unit, it's looking at how narratives differ from conventional fiction films, and how the representations are shaped based upon how the subjects of those documentaries want to be representative. And whether or not documentary film can ever be completely objective, or whether or not they all become incredibly subjective. In section C and section D, we look at different film movements. So, for example, we may look at silent cinema, the work of Sergei Eisenstein's montage cinema from the Soviet Union back in the early 20th century. And then a little bit later on, we'll look at experimental film dating 1960 to 2000, films such as Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction, which took the traditional kind of linear storytelling format and changed it into a much more non-linear form, with some quite challenging and quite controversial dialogue. In component 3, we have the production element of the course, whereby learners can either produce a short film, which lasts from 4 to 5 minutes, or they can write a screenplay for a short film, 1,600 to 1,800 words, both of which would include a digital storyboard and an evaluative analysis, which basically gives our learners the chance to explain how they've produced their short film or their screenplay, and the different influences that they've taken on board for that production. So as discussed, the subject is examined in 3 components. The first 2 components are assessed at the end of year 13 with terminal examinations. Both of those exams are 2.5 hours long and worth 35% each. And component 3 is the production non-exam assessment element, which is worth 30%. So there is quite a nice balance in terms of the examination and the coursework, which really kind of does allow our learners to shape the course kind of around their abilities. So when thinking about who should consider this subject, I wanted to start off just by trying to break down a few myths that surround film studies. The first being that maybe we just sit around and watch films. Now, certainly we do have to sit and watch films, just like if we study English literature, we have to read books. But what we do is we treat every film as a work of art, and we have to appreciate it, not only in terms of its aesthetic detail, but we have to think about it as a vehicle for exploring different values, attitudes, and beliefs, and encoding those films with different representations. So it really is kind of an in-depth study of each of those as the product of something wider. In terms of the second myth, film studies is easy, we have to kind of consider that, yes, watching films in a very passive way and just sitting and enjoying those films is maybe kind of an easy part of the filmmaking viewing process. But however, what we do in film studies is that we look at a whole host of issues in relation to those films. So we might explore representation of race or gender. We might look at particular issues associated with history, society, and culture. We'll look at kind of the critical perspectives that surround those films. And in terms of the film production, it's very much about developing their technical skills as well as their creative skills, and being able to kind of piece those together with their knowledge of kind of the critical context behind film studies. So the short answer would be that film studies is not an easy subject, and is very much an academic subject. In terms of the third myth, that universities don't see film as a viable entry qualification, film is highly regarded as an academic discipline and has been for around about the last 50 years. Oxford and Cambridge now offer master's and PhD courses in film studies and screen arts, and Russell Group universities accept film as an appropriate A-level qualification. And a number of film graduates do then go on to working within the film industry. So who should consider this subject? In terms of our entry requirements, in addition to the standard 5 grade 4s that are required for study at Wootton Park, you will also need to have gained a grade 6 or higher at GCSE English Language or English Literature. This is just to make sure that you can cope with the demands of the course, but also to make sure that you enjoy your studies. In terms of who it would suit, what we're looking for is a critical, creative, literate learner who is interested in film, culture, history, and the arts. Someone that's self-motivated, independent, looking for opportunities to learn, study, and practice. If you're thinking about the different combinations with film, good partners are English literature, the languages, French and Spanish, different creative subjects like art and drama, or maybe the humanities such as history, geography, or religious studies. It may also work very, very nicely with those subjects you might not expect, such as the sciences or maths. And finally, why Wootton Park? Our department within English is incredibly experienced and used to delivering the A-level course. Myself, I am a graduate of film studies in part of my degree, and we all have a very kind of rich understanding of film as not only an artistic medium, but also as an academic medium as well. Our teaching has been graded as being outstanding. That's not only by Ofsted, but also through internal monitoring and external standardization. We have an extremely strong department, excellent learner engagement, strong assessment planning and outcomes. So we really do invest ourselves within the learning experience at A level and at all different levels. In terms of complementing the A-level course, we'll hopefully be able to run lots of trips and experiences to bring the course to life, different cultural trips, university visits, cinema and theatre trips. One thing that we're very, very keen to make sure that we do is allow our learners the opportunity to go to universities and take part in academic talks about film. We've also got a wonderful knowledge hub with plenty of sixth form facilities for our learners to be able to use, and a strong careers program which will encourage our learners to think about how film might work for them after they have finished their A-level courses or after graduation. I hope that does cover everything for you. But if you do have any further questions about film, please do either contact the heads of sixth form, Ms. Rautenberg or Mr. Kilcoyne, or alternatively, you can contact myself, Joel Cooper, the curriculum leader for English, at the email address on the screen. Alternatively, you can contact our reception and they will be able to put you through to me directly. I hope that helps to clarify all details about film studies, and I look forward to hopefully meeting you soon. Thank you very much.